Let's understand about deployment pipelines here. So we are seeing deployment pipelines. What is this deployment pipelines? Currently in Power BI, it's a preview feature. Make a note, and we'll see what is this deployment pipeline, how to create a pipeline. So they given 4 steps: create a pipeline, assign your workspace, develop and test your content, share with your users. Let's see how to do this. And one more thing you need to notice, you can use this feature for only premium workspaces. Look at this. We're telling that deployment pipelines is a premium only feature here. Premium only feature. You can use it for premium workspaces. Fine. First of all, what is the need of this deployment pipelines? Let's try to understand it. So any BA project when you take, it contains 3 stages. First stage is development stage. Next one is test and production stages. 3 stages will be there. So in the development stage, we'll do the development. Development will be carried out in the development stage. Once the development is done, we'll move to the testing, test. And once you move the content to the test, we'll share with the testers and UAT people, user acceptance test. And once it is done, then we will move to the production stage. And from there, we'll share them with the users, end users. Same thing we need to do in Power BI also. In the older days, when deployment pipelines is not there, how we used to do that? Let me show you in this image. When deployment pipelines is not there, first we'll do the development in desktop. Once we are done with the development, we'll create a workspace for development in service, and we will publish our code there. And we will develop the things. Once you are done with development, then we will create one workspace for test, next stage, and we will manually deploy it. We need to create the workspace, we need to manually deploy it. And then we'll share from there to QA people and UAT. Once they review the code and once they give the sign off, then we will move that to production. We'll create one workspace for production. We'll move that code to production stage. And from there, we'll share with the users. This is the flow. So we used to do this manually. So it is taking a lot of time for a Power BI developer. And Power BI team came up with a new feature, deployment pipelines. With these deployment pipelines, there are few advantages here which I listed. It will improve the developer productivity. So here there is no case manually create a workspace and manually move the code to each stage, development, test and production. You don't want to do that. Obviously it will improve the productivity. When you are not going to do it manually, it will improve the productivity. And when you with the deployment pipelines, we can deliver the updates quickly. When you made any change in dev, to move it to the test or to move it to the production stage, it doesn't take time. You will understand. With no time, you can move it. And third advantage is very less manual work here. No manual work at all. So when there is no manual work, obviously we'll reduce the errors. So we'll try to understand. End of this discussion, we'll came to know disadvantages. First, let's start with how to do this. First, to start this, you need to have one workspace where it and this workspace should be a premium workspace. You need to have one workspace and it should be a premium workspace under premium capacity, and you need to have some content over there. Take an example, DP, in short, deployment pipelines. I'm calling it as DP, and I suffix that with dev. So basically, when we start any project, so we'll have workspaces like this: project name and suffix with dev, project name, suffix with test, and project name suffix with for production you don't have anything, just project name. So naming convention, basically most of the people will follow like this. The same way, let's take this DPS project name and I am suffix with dev. So this is the development stage. And I want, so if you see here, this deployment pipelines, we can do it in three stages. We'll have three stages. When I create it, you can see development stage, test, and production stage. Production stage, let's start creating the deployment pipeline and understanding it. So if you want to create the deployment pipeline, just go to the deployment pipeline and there is an option called create a pipeline. Click on create a pipeline. It will ask pipeline name. So I will give the pipeline name as deployment pipeline demo. Deployment pipeline demo. And you can write some description if you want. Just click on create. So I said that when you create any deployment pipeline, you will have three stages. Now the second step is you need to assign a workspace to this. Go and assign the workspace. I have a workspace here. When you look at here in the workspaces, I have a workspace where I have done my development and I have some content here. Two data sets are there and two reports and one dashboard. Totally, I have a content here. Totally five different objects are there. Two data sets, two reports, and one dashboard. This is dev. I'm done with my development. I developed the data set. On top of them, I create the reports. On top of them, I created the dashboard. It is there in development environment now. In the older days, what we used to do is we'll go and create another workspace here. We'll go and create another workspace manually. Create a workspace. Basically, I said that what? We'll give the workspace name as project name. So here project name is DP and we will suffix with test. Already we have a workspace for dev and we'll create another workspace with DP test. And we need to manually move the code to this workspace. And once you move the code to here, we'll share with testing team and UAT team. So you can call it as QA team. You can move it QA team and UAT team. So they will test and review our content. Once they give the sign off, we manually created another workspace then. So finally, basically, we'll give the just project name. For production workspaces, we will just give the project name. And once you need to manually again move the code here, then that content you need to share with end users or clients. You need to share it. So manually you need to do it. Now you don't want to manually do that. Just go to the deployment pipeline which we created. Click on open. You need to assign a workspace now. Go and assign a workspace. Development. So the workspace which I have is development workspace, that is DP dev. Assign it. And then you just click on assign. When you click on assign, you are seeing one workspace here and it contains two data sets, two reports, and one dashboard. So once the development is completely done here, then you can deploy that code to test. So you don't want to manually do this now. You don't want to go and create the workspace. You don't want to manually publish your code to the next workspace which you created now. You can automatically do it from here, deployment pipelines. Open this. There is an option called deploy. When you click on deploy, the code will be deployed here. So what it will do is it will create one workspace and it will deploy all this code. Two data sets, two reports, and one dashboard. It will deploy. Basically, what name it will give you, know? So it is asking, do you want to go to the workspace which we created now? We'll go it, just close this. So basically, what is the name it will give is, what is the workspace name you have? To this name, it will add in the square brackets test. Basically, this is not the naming convention I'm expecting here. I want to have the project name like DP, and after that I want to suffix with test. You can rename the workspace. Once you deploy it, you can rename the workspace. You can go here You want to go to workspace settings. When you go to the more options here, when you go to workspace settings here, you can rename the workspace. I want this as DP test. This is the workspace name I want. Just click on save. Now the naming convention is perfect. Project name, dev environment, project name, test environment, or testing stage. Okay. So once you deploy it, you can go and check your code. So it will create a workspace here. You can go and check it. You got the two data sets automatically here, and you'll get that reports here. Once you deploy it, what we need to do is the first step, once after deploying the code, you want to do some deployment settings. There is some deployment settings. We need to go and do the deployment settings. What is this deployment settings is? Basically, when you have multiple environment, multiple stages, in dev stage, we'll be taking the data from different data sources. Data sources. Data sources. So we'll take from, uh, we'll have dev databases. So we'll take it from dev when we're doing the development. When the code is in test next stage, it will take the data from, there will be data sources for test, different data sources, different server and different database will bring the data, right? And when the code is in production, we'll take the data from a different data source. When you are starting the development, so the data source we connect will contain some sample data. When you move it to the test, it will contain more volumes of data, and when you move it to the production stage, so it will connect to the production databases and it need to show the data. So here the thing is, when you deploy the code from dev to test, you need to go and tell here from where you need to take the data. So what I did is I created three databases here. Dev, I'm taking the data from this server and from this database. For test, I'm taking the data from this server and this database. For production, I'm taking the data from this server and this database. Okay. So I have development data in this server and database. Some testing data I have in the server and database, and production data is there in this server and database. When you deploy the code, so when in dev workspace, I need to take the data from this. And in test workspace, I need to take the data from this. In production workspace, I need to take the data from this. Where you need to configure it is, when you deploy, you want to go to the deployment settings. There you need to configure it. So when you go here, so you will have data sets. So data sets, right? Which one will bring the data from this data sources? From these data sources, when you are in dev workspace, that data set need to bring the data from this data source. When you are in test workspace, the data set need to consume the data from this database. When you are production workspace, the data set need to consume the data from this data source. This. So you need to go on. So I have two data sets. I need to go to each data set. I need to tell from where they need to consume the data. Frankly, when you go and open this workspace now in the test, so when I go and open the report, you will not see the data. When you are deploying the code from one stage to another stage, it will not deploy any data. When you are in development, when you go to the development here, when you open it, you can see some data in the reports and dashboards which we developed. You are seeing some data. But when you deploy it to the next stage, when you go and open anything here, you will not see any data here. These visuals are not showing any data. Even when you open the report will not show any data. So why it is not showing any data here is, when you deploy the code from one stage to another stage, so it will deploy only metadata. It will not deploy the data. In this data set, it will not deploy the data, it will deploy only metadata. And to this data set, now you need to tell from where you need to bring the data in this deployment settings. Sometimes you will bring the data from same data source, sometimes the data source will change. Now in my case, the data source need to change. For development workspace, the data source is different. For test stage, the data sources are different. I need to change it. How can you change it is, in the deployment settings you can change it. Go to the deployment settings, go to each data set and make the changes. So deployment settings are nothing but data set rules configuration. We need to configure the rules for each data set. I have two data sets. I need to configure the dataset rules here. That is nothing but deployment settings. So dataset rule configuration means this dataset, from which data source it need to bring the data. From which data source it need to bring the data. And same thing happens here. And the same thing will happens here. So this product analysis dataset, from which data source it need to bring the data. We need to tell now. So click on this dataset. When you click on this, we can configure the dataset rules in two different ways, guys. Let me show here. We can configure the dataset rules in two different ways: data source rules or parameters rules. We'll try to understand. Sometimes while connecting to the data sources in Power BI, what we will do is we'll directly connect to them by passing the server name and database name. Here, directly I'm passing the server name, directly I'm passing the database name while connecting to the database while bringing the tables. This is one case. Another case is we'll create the parameters. When you look at another report here, product analysis report, in customer analysis report, customer analysis dataset, what we are doing is we are connecting to the data sources here directly by writing the server name and database name here. But there is another data set which we prepared here. The data set name is product analysis. When you go to the product analysis, when I go here, I'm connecting to the data sources. So I created two parameters, one parameter for server name, another parameter for database name. When I go and see here, I'm connecting to the servers and database through parameters. When you have parameters, when you are connecting, well, preparing the data set, when you are connecting to the data sources using parameters, what we can do is here we can go and define the rules in parameter rules. If you don't create any parameters while connecting to the data sources, that time we'll go and utilize data source rules. First, let me go with data source rules for now. Data source rules. So one data set, customer analysis data set. If you look at this, there is a customer analysis data set. In this case, while connecting to the data source, while connecting to this, I haven't created any parameters. Directly I given the connection information. Then you need to go with data source rules now. Data source rules. But in product analysis, while connecting to the data source, I created the parameters, I connected it. When you do that, you can go with parameters rules. You'll understand? Let me open this customer analysis. You need to go and add the rule now. So now when you look at this, parameter rules are grayed out. So you'll have dataset rules can be configured in two different ways. One is data source rules, second one is parameters rules. So here parameter rules is grayed out. For customer analysis, why? Because we haven't created any parameters to connect to the data sources. That is the reason it is grayed out. Only data source rules is enabled. You need to do this now. So go and add the rule here. When you click on add the rule, you need to tell that in the development, when the data set is taking the data from this server and this database, so in the test stage, it need to take from which server, which database, you need to configure it here. You need to configure it here. Go here, and in the development, it is taking the data from this server and this database. Server and database, we are clearly seeing here it is taking from a server like this and database AdventureWorks DW 2014. But when it comes to test, it need to take it from a different place, different server and different database, 2016 database. What we need to do here is go here, and it will ask, do you want to go with same connection information for both dev and test? So what we need to do here is, so the problem is, I said that when you deploy the code from one stage to another stage, for the data sets, it will not deploy the data. It will deploy only metadata. Into the data set, you need to bring the data. So do you want to bring the data from development from the same data source? When the test, same data source? Sometimes it will happen. So, or else different one. That is what we are trying to configure it. This time, it is different one. I want to go to this test workspace data set. So you want to go to the deployment pipeline, go here, and you want to set this deployment settings, customer analysis, add new rule. This time, when this is for development, when you deploy this code to the test, replace this connection information with what? Replace this connection information with what? This time, if you want to go with same, select this same database, same server. That is not my case. I want to go with other. When you go with other, you can provide the server name and you can provide the database name. This time, let me copy. This is the server name for test workspace. Go and give the server name first. And the database name is DW 2016. Give the database name here. So scroll down and you'll see an option called save. Fine. We change it. Where we are doing this now? Data source rules. So once you are done with one data set, you want to do it for another data set also. So we are done here. Just go back. We need to do it for product analysis also. Open the product analysis. In the product analysis, you can do both the things. You can define data source rules or you can even define parameter rules. Why? Because this data set while creating, I created two parameters for server name and database name. You can clearly see here. I created two parameters here. I created two parameters in the product analysis. When you go here, I created two parameters with the name server name and database name. While connecting to the databases, I'm using that parameters. You can clearly observe here, server name and database name parameters. So when I have the parameters while connecting to the data sources, you can go and define parameter rules here. Go to the parameter rules, click on add new rule. So you'll see the parameters which you have in the data set. There is a server name. Now currently it is taking this server, and when it is in test, do you want to go with same server or different server? If it is different server, copy the server name, provide the server name there, provide the server name. I'll copy the server name and add another rule. Next one is, next parameter is database. Do you want to go with the same database or different database? This time it's a different database. Go and give the database information here and scroll down and click on save. Fine, very good. We are done with applying the deployment settings now. So what you need to do again is you need to redeploy the code. Every time when you redeploy the code, whatever the data sets you have here, right? So you have customer analysis data set, whatever the rules you uh, assign here. So when you deploy this customer analysis, you define some data source rules, right? So you are asking to replace one server with another server, one database name with another database name. That will be assigned. Same way, when you deploy the product analysis, every time when you deploy it, product analysis, what it will do? Whatever the parameter rules you defined, for server name, you are asking to replace with a different name. For database name, you are asking to uh, replace with another name. That settings will apply. So let's deploy it again. Let's deploy it again here. Click on deploy. When you click on deploy, so it will not only deploy the data sets now. Once after deploying, you define some configurations, deployment rules. So for dataset rules, that will be applied now. So deployment is completed. You can go to the workspace now. You can go to the workspace, test workspace, refresh it once. Now, again, when you open any report, you will not see the data. What you need to do is, this time, dataset, when you go to the dataset, here you can see whether the connection is established correctly or not. When you go to the settings, when you go to the gateway connection, you can clearly observe here, it is taking the data from which database? AdventureWorks DW 2016. It got changed. When you are in test, we are taking from 2016. Go and look at in the dev. When you go to the dev workspace here, for the same data set, when you go to the settings here, in the dev, we are taking from where? 2014. Our rules are working now. When you deploy the code from dev to test, we ask them to replace with 2016, wherever 14 is there. they are working. So what we need to do now is, if you want to see the data in the reports and dashboards, you need to refresh this data set and you need to bring the data. If you want to refresh this data set, if you need to bring the data, my data source is a SQL server. I want to bring the data from on-premise SQL server. First thing you need to do is, you need to go here in the settings, you need to assign the gateway connection. Go to the gateway connection. I already created a gateway connection for this information, for this server, for this database. Already I have a gateway connection. I'll use that gateway connection. So that the gateway connection name I given is test. Click on apply. So once you assign this, go to another data set also, second data set, and go to the settings and even assign. Here also, look at this. The database was changed and you want to go and use this. Just click on apply. Done, guys. Now go and refresh it. You assigned the gateway connection. Now you are good to refresh or schedule refresh. Just let me click on refresh now. When I click on refresh, it will go to our data source. This time we are giving which data source? When you are in dev, they are taking the data from different server, different database. When the workspace, when the content is there in the test, next stage, it is taken from this server and this database. So once the refresh is completed, you can go and refresh the workspace once, go to the content page. So we refreshed customer analysis. You can go and open this report. When you open the report, you want to see the data. Yes, perfectly it is showing the data by bringing the data from where? A different server and different database. Do the same thing to this data set also. Go and refresh or schedule refresh it. Refresh or schedule refresh it. Once the refresh is done, so it got finished, go to the content. When you open the report, it will show the data now. Yes, it is showing the data. When you even go and open the dashboard will show the data now. Dashboard will show the data. Fine. Like this, when you deploy the code from one stage, development stage, to the next stage, test. First stage is development, second stage is test. You need to go to the deployment settings. You need to do that. So now, once your test stage is ready, you need to share this content with the testers, create a app if required, share that app with the testers and UAT team. Ask them to review, and once they're done with review, once they give the sign off, then you want to move your code to production and you want to share with the users. Look at this. Here clearly you are seeing when this workspace is test workspace. Then where there is a workspace, dev workspace, you are seeing development here. Development. Now, so I'm done with my testing. My testing team and UAT team, they given, uh, they review the code and they said that all the reports and dashboards are fine. You can deploy them to production and you can share them with users, end users or clients. You can share them. Now you need to click on deploy. When I click on deploy, the code will deploy from test to production stage. So two data sets, two reports, and one dashboard will be deployed. So just click on deploy. As soon as you click on deploy, it will create its own workspace. It will create its own workspace. Basically, the name will be the workspace name, what you are seeing here. Sorry, the workspace name, what you are seeing here, DP test. For that, in the backend, it will write production. Let's see. And by itself, it will create one workspace name. And to that workspace, it will move all this content. So let's see. Click on deploy. It will create, look at this. It is creating a workspace with the name DP test. What is the workspace name you have here? To that name, it will add production. Basically, the naming convention is not perfect. We will rename that. We'll rename that. So now what you can do is, it got deployed. Just close this. Now, how can you rename this? Go here and workspace settings. Rename this workspace just DP. I said that basically the naming convention will be like this. For production, we'll have just project name. For dev workspace, project name will suffix dev. For test workspace, project name will suffix test. So the naming conventions, most of the people will go like this. Now we deployed it. Now you can go to this workspace. you can go to this DP workspace. It's a production workspace. Again, same thing will happen, guys. When you deploy the code from DP test workspace to production workspace, when it deploy data set, it will deploy what? Only metadata. It will not deploy the data which is there in this data set. Again, when you go and look at this workspace, the DP workspace, so when you go and see the content, when you open any dashboard or report, it will not show any data. It will not show any data. Even when you go and open any report, it will not show any data. What you need to do this time? You need to go to the data set. First thing, first of all, once you deploy it from this stage to the next stage, we need to go and configure the deployment settings here. You need to tell from which data source you need to bring the data. What we did here, when you deploy the code from development to test, same thing we need to do when you deploy the code from test to production. Go to the settings, customer analysis. What we selected here? We selected data source rules, add the rules, and so now when it is in production, I need to go with a different server. So previously the server is 02. Now I want to go with 01 server. Previously the database is DW 2016. Now it is DW 2017. So let's go and do that. So I want to go and select this. Here we want to go with others. Give the database name and server name. This time I want to bring it from 2017 DW. This is the database name from where I need to bring the data. Server is also different. Go and give the server name a different name. Different name. Just scroll down, click on save. We are done with this data set. Go to the product analysis data set. Product analysis data set. This time I'll go with parameter rules. So why? Because this data set contains parameters. You can add the rules. Choose the parameter, server name. Server name is different. This time this is the server name. I'm copying it and I'll give this server name. So basically you are seeing 02 server. I don't want to bring it from 02 server. I want to bring it from 01 server and go with database, and it is bringing from DW 2016. I don't want to bring it from 16. I want to bring it from 17. Go and bring it from 17. Click on save. We're done, guys. So we have two data sets. We're done with deployment settings for the two data sets. Once you are done with this, just click on done. And one more thing you need to do now. You need to redeploy it. When you redeploy it, these two data sets, when you are deploying, whatever the configurations you assigned here, those will be applicable. Now redeploy it again. When you redeploy it, now the database will change from 16 to 17. The server will change from 02 to 01. 02 to 01. You can observe it. So you can just click on go to workspace. Directly we are going to the production workspace. You can go to the data sets. You can check it. So where you can check it? In settings, when you go here, gateway connection, clearly you are observing here the server is changing to 01. The database is changing to DW 2017. Perfectly it is changing. So, and we know that when you open this, you will not see the data now. What you need to do if you want to see the data? You need to go to the data set. You need to go to settings. You need to assign a gateway connection here. I have a gateway connection created already to this server, to this database. I will assign here. So I given the gateway connection name as production. Let me select this, click on apply. Same thing we'll do with other data set also. Go to the product analysis data set, go to the settings, gateway connection. Here also it got changed. So server 02 is replaced with 01 and database 16 is replaced with 17. Now go and assign a gateway connection called production. Click on apply. Once you are done with this, you can go and start refreshing it. Just click on refresh. Just click on refresh. When you refresh, it will go to a different server now. It will go to a different data source. It will try to bring the data. Look at this. It is refreshing. So refresh is done. Let us refresh this product analysis also. Click on refresh. This will go to a different server, different database, and it will bring the data to these data sets. Once the data is there in the data sets, the refresh is done. You can go to the reports, refresh once, and you can open the reports now. When you open the customer analysis report, you can see the data now. And same way, when you open the another report, product analysis, look at this. It is taking the data from server 1 and database 2017. And you can go and even open the dashboard. It is taking the data from it. When you are in dev workspace, you are taking the data from this connection, data source. For test, from this data source connection. In production, this data source connection. Like this, you no need to manually move the code. From now, so we are done with initial setup. We publish the code from dev to test. We are done with deployment settings. We publish the code from test to production stage. We're done with deployment settings. So now we will see one more thing here. That one more thing we'll try to understand is comparing the stages. Comparing two stages, development with test and production stages. How to compare? I'll show you. When you make any changes in any stage, let me go to the dev stage here, dp dev, and let me open one report, product analysis report or something. Let me add, let me open one report here, product analysis report, and let me edit this. Let me make some change here. So when you go to page 2, I have one additional visual, or else let me add an additional visual here. I'm taking one card visual. Into the card visual, I'll drag this time some sales value, sales amount value. When you drag it, when you save this, we made some changes in the dev stage. For which report? Product analysis report. We made some changes in dev. Now go to the deployment pipelines. You can compare the stages. Look at this. When you're comparing dev stage with test, it is giving a red, an indication that they are not in sync. But when you look at here, when you compare with the test and production stage, they are in sync. When they are in green, they are in sync. When they are in red, they are not in sync. What you can do is you can click on compare now. When you click on compare, now this data set is in sync. Data set is in sync, and this data set is also in sync. Customer analysis report is in sync. Product analysis report is not in sync. You are seeing some additional symbols here. The meaning is they are not in sync. So scroll down. There is a dashboard here. This is in sync. Now what you can do is you don't want to deploy all the code. When I click on deploy, it will deploy two data sets again, two reports, and one dashboard. You don't want to deploy all of them, right? It's true. There is a change in where? When you click on compare, you can clearly see there is a change in product analysis report. You can deploy only product analysis. Select the product analysis, click on deploy. So click on continue. So when you deploy, only product analysis deployed. Within fraction of seconds, you got deploy the code. But previously, we need to manually go and deploy that code to test workspace. Now see how quickly we deployed it. Now, once you deploy it here, now dev and test are in sync now. It is showing green, but test and production is not in sync. What we want to do now? You want to click on compare. You can understand which one is not in sync. You can select only that and you click on deploy. When you click on deploy, click on continue. Go to the workspace, you will see the change within fraction of seconds. We added a card visual here. See how quickly you got that card visual till production. So that is the advantage with deployment pipelines. On the whole, you might understand what is the advantages we have with deployment pipelines. Deployment pipelines, the advantages is productivity will increase. Every time when you make any changes, to move that changes from one stage to another stage, it doesn't take much time. So when it is not taking much time, the productivity is increasing. So any changes you made in dev, it can move to the production with very less time. Content updates are faster. So there is no manual work to compare whether the content is changed or it is in sync. No manual work. So when there is no manual work, it will reduce the errors. This is all about deployment pipelines.